On top, of course, the latest political developments. Of course, it's impacting us here on the north side of the border after Donald Trump has been re-elected to the White House. Could that spell trouble for the electric vehicle industry?
Yesterday, Joe Biden came to Michigan to pose for photos at the picket line. But it's his policies that send Michigan auto workers to the unemployment line.
Trump has torn down Biden's electric car dream, calling the push for EVs a scam. Biden's new emissions plan could destroy gas car makers, forcing everyone into electric. But there's one huge problem. He's not lowering the prices. People are starting to turn away from EVs, and the market is crashing. Could Trump's bold promise be the last hope for gas car lovers? Is this the moment the EV dream unravels? Trump's opposition to EVs. Donald Trump's comeback is set to reshape America's approach to energy and the environment in a big way. Think more oil, fewer incentives for electric vehicles, and a pivot away from green policies he's dismissed as the Green New Scam. His victory opens the door to an agenda focused on boosting crude production and power plant construction, moves that could send shockwaves across the industry. While his proposals might face resistance in Congress, especially from Republicans hesitant to scrap the Inflation Reduction Act's energy tax credits, Trump can still wield executive authority to get the ball rolling on day one. And the big winners? Oil and gas companies. According to Dan Eberhard, CEO of oilfield services company Canary, Trump's return means drill, baby drill, in full swing. Offshore lease sales, quicker pipeline approvals, more fracking on federal lands, a full-on push to lower energy costs, he explains. The energy policy under Trump will likely focus heavily on fossil fuels, doubling down on domestic energy production. Electric cars, though, might not fare as well. Trump didn't make them a campaign centerpiece, but he often used them as a talking point to go after his opponent, accusing him, wrongly, of wanting to ban gas-powered vehicles, with 71% of Republicans saying they wouldn't consider an EV. According to a recent Gallup poll, Trump's criticisms resonate. For Trump and his supporters, EVs are more than just cars. They represent a push toward China, job losses, and big changes American workers may not be ready for. In sharp contrast to Biden, who has championed EVs with significant tax incentives, Trump plans to pull back. Biden's push raised EV registrations from 1% of the market in 2019 to 7% in 2024, fueled by credits of up to $7,500 for new EVs. But Trump aims to roll back those tax benefits and stop the public investment in charging infrastructure, like the $7.5 billion plan for 500,000 charging stations. Republicans are also eyeing the waiver that lets California enforce stricter car pollution standards than federal guidelines, potentially ending a major boost for EV adoption. The Environmental Protection Agency's tailpipe emission standards, which effectively push automakers to sell more electric and hybrid models, may also be on the chopping block. Former Trump advisors have already prepared draft orders that could have the EPA review the rules. Oil industry lobbyists, meanwhile, are pushing for limits on tax credits for leased EVs, setting the stage for a potential policy overhaul. All of this puts Democrats in a tough spot. On one hand, they've invested heavily in climate action, casting it as a moral duty to save the planet. But for many voters, especially those in battleground states like Michigan and Wisconsin, the idea of electric vehicles feels out of touch. Recent surveys by centrist groups like Third Way and the New Deal found that 44% of voters hold a negative view of EVs, especially among young people, Latinos, and those without college degrees. It's no surprise, then, that Trump leans into this divide. For every American who views EVs as a symbol of clean energy, there's another who sees them as impractical and costly, far removed from everyday life. Biden may be proud of his climate policies or Bidenomics, but there's a real risk that his message can come off as disconnected. Democrats emphasize clean energy as a moral choice, which can sound preachy to many voters, especially those outside major urban centers who don't see the day-to-day benefits. Polls show that climate change rarely ranks as a top priority for voters. Third Way found that only 4% considered it a deciding factor in their vote, with issues like the economy, border security, and democracy taking precedence. Even with concerns about inflation and cost of living, gas prices are less of a hot-button issue than other essentials like food, housing, and healthcare. That's not to say climate-focused voters don't matter. They tend to be highly educated and likely to vote for Biden. But there aren't enough of them to offset a bigger group of economy-first voters who care more about jobs and financial stability. These voters, often women, Latinos, younger people, and those without a college degree, lean toward Trump by a solid margin and believe that climate policy should take a back seat to inflation control. For the Biden campaign, this is a dilemma. Focus group data suggests they may need to rethink how they talk about climate change, especially as it relates to transportation. In many districts where charging infrastructure is still sparse, EVs seem irrelevant. And in places where stations exist, they often serve affluent areas, not the average neighborhood. As it stands, voters see Trump as better positioned to lower energy costs, increase domestic production, and reduce reliance on foreign oil. Biden is credited with fighting climate change, but the tangible impact remains unclear for many Americans. Going forward, Biden might need to power down on the big climate pitch, at least until Americans are ready for an EV in every driveway. Electric cars and job loss concerns. As EVs roll out and gain momentum, there's a big question on the horizon. Will American workers get left behind? The shift from traditional gas-powered cars to electric models is exciting, but it could also mean major changes for the people who build, maintain, and repair these vehicles. EVs are simpler to make than gasoline cars. And while that sounds like a good thing for manufacturers, it's not so great for workers. Electric cars have fewer parts, sometimes less than half the number found in a typical car, and they take around 30% less time to assemble. Add to that more robots and fewer manual jobs, and you have a situation where people may lose their roles. Plus, EVs don't need oil changes, so repair shops will feel the impact too. This shift will have a big effect, especially in places like Michigan and Ohio, where car manufacturing has been the backbone of the economy. The transition to EVs could cut jobs in powertrain manufacturing, dealership services, and the global auto supply chain. So the question becomes, who will fill the jobs left behind? Lawrence Burns, a former General Motors executive, says that simpler designs and fewer parts mean fewer jobs to assemble them. It's just a more efficient way to design cars, but that efficiency means fewer people are needed to build them. But it's not all bad news. While fewer people may be needed to build gas-powered cars, there are new opportunities in EV production. Think about it. Someone has to design and build the batteries, electric motors, and software that power these vehicles. GM and Ford are already investing billions into EV development. GM is spending $20 billion by 2025, and Ford is adding hundreds of new jobs to its Rouge complex. These are signs that the future of cars is electric, but will American workers get their fair share of the benefits? Still, concerns about job losses are very real. In Germany, the shift to electric vehicles is expected to cost hundreds of thousands of jobs by 2030. Back in the United States, the Congressional Research Service raised alarms about the 15,000 American workers who build parts for gas-powered engines. The problem is simple. EVs have fewer parts. As a result, many jobs in assembly, engineering, and production could disappear. But the good news is that new jobs will be created in fields like battery production, software engineering, and the development of self-driving cars. However, the skills needed for these new roles aren't always easy to find. Few United States universities offer degrees in battery engineering, for example. Experts say Congress should invest in retraining programs to help workers transition into these new roles and ensure they don't get left behind in this rapidly changing industry. The United Auto Workers Union is also raising concerns. They want to make sure that the jobs created by the EV shifts stay in the United States and offer fair pay and benefits. The real question is whether we'll make sure that the new jobs making EVs are right here with the same pay and benefits as the old ones, said UAW spokesman Brian Rothenberg. The union is pushing for a national policy that supports American-made electric vehicles and ensures workers aren't left in the dust. And it's true. Making EVs is different from making traditional cars. Gas-powered vehicles have complex engines, transmissions, and exhaust systems. EVs, on the other hand, have simpler motors and batteries. The assembly process is more automated, and workers aren't needed for tasks like putting together complicated parts. This means fewer people are needed to put the car together, and more robots are stepping in. Sam Abwelsamid, an analyst at Guidehouse, explains that assembling the motors and batteries is done more by machines than by hand, which makes the process faster, but also cuts down on jobs. Plus, there's a shift in the way cars are wired. Instead of complex wiring for features like air conditioning and electronics, EVs are designed with a single computer system that does it all. So fewer workers are needed to install wiring, and even less work is required in the assembly process. The future of cars, especially with self-driving tech, could make matters even worse for workers. Autonomous vehicles require even fewer parts since they don't need seats or air conditioning for passengers. This could further reduce the number of jobs required to design and build cars. But, as with any change, it's not all bad. While some jobs will disappear, new opportunities are on the way. But the question is, will America make sure those opportunities benefit workers right here at home? The UAW argues that now is the time to invest in United States manufacturing to ensure these jobs stay in America and offer fair wages and benefits for workers who help create the cars of the future. The future of transportation is changing fast. But will American workers be ready for it? Challenges in the EV market? Transportation is one of the biggest parts of our daily lives. And let's face it, big changes only happen when they become the new normal. Take EVs, for example. While awareness is growing, about 65% of Americans have never driven one or even met someone who owns one. But here's the thing, EV adoption is speeding up. Why? Rising gas prices, longer battery ranges, cheaper batteries, and government incentives are making EVs more attractive. It's clear that things are starting to shift, and fast. Younger Americans, especially Gen Z, are more aware of environmental issues, with 42% saying they'd consider buying an EV, compared to just 32% of baby boomers. However, despite these encouraging trends, the EV industry still faces some major hurdles. The first big one? Price. EVs are more expensive to build than gasoline cars, mainly because of those pricey batteries needed for long-range driving. Even though EVs cost less to run over time, the upfront cost is still a deal-breaker for many. Right now, most EVs are priced over $30,000 before any tax credits, and used models are typically older with shorter battery life. But here's the silver lining. As more people jump on the EV bandwagon, prices will come down and trade-ins will become more common. Another challenge is range anxiety. Think about it. We're all used to hopping into our cars, driving wherever we want, and not worrying about stopping for gas every few hours. But with EVs, that's a different story. Range anxiety is real. People wonder, how far can I go before needing to charge? And don't even get started on winter, when the cold can drain an EV's battery faster than usual. Most EVs can travel between 200 to 300 miles on a single charge, which is plenty for the average American who drives about 36 miles a day. But for road trips or freezing weather, that range can feel a little too limiting. Then there's the selection. 10 years ago, there were only a handful of EV models on the market. Fast forward to today, and there are 28 different models available from 18 manufacturers. But still, compared to gas-powered cars, the options are limited. Sure, sedans and SUVs are becoming more common, but if you want a truck or minivan, you're still out of luck. Ford's F-150 Lightning, the electric version of America's best-selling truck, is already sold out for the next year. So while choices are growing, we're not quite there yet. Finding a qualified mechanic for an EV can also be a struggle. Car repairs are often cheaper at independent shops, but with EVs, things are a bit more complicated. Most repair shops aren't trained to handle the specific needs of an electric car, and fixing things like the battery pack, which can cost over $5,000, usually means going back to the dealer. Luckily, EVs need less maintenance than traditional cars, but when something does break, it can get expensive. And of course, there's the issue of charging stations. The United States has about 56,000 charging stations, with most of them being level 2 chargers. While the federal government is working to fix this by investing $7.5 billion into new charging infrastructure, it's still a hassle for many EV owners, especially those who live in apartments or have to park on the street. This is one area where the government's efforts could make a big difference in the near future. Let's talk about charging speeds too. Charging an EV can be time-consuming. There are 3 types of chargers. Level 1, which can take 20 hours or more to fully charge. Level 2, which can take anywhere from 3 to 10 hours. And Level 3, which can charge an EV to 80% in 30 to 60 minutes. Sure, that sounds quick, but imagine how much time that adds up to on a long road trip. Thankfully, charging technology is improving. Porsche's Taycan can get up to 88% charged in just 23 minutes, and Tesla's Model S can gain 130 miles of range in just 15 minutes. Now here's a fun fact. EV chargers aren't all the same. Level 2 chargers are mostly standardized, but there are 3 types of DC fast chargers: CCS, CHAdeMO, and Tesla's supercharger. This can be confusing for drivers who need to find the right charger. Imagine pulling up to a station only to realize your car can't use it. It's like being in a race but finding out you're using the wrong kind of fuel. As more and more people drive EVs, the electric grid will need to handle a lot more power. The United States Department of Energy expects electricity consumption to rise by 38% by 2050 due to the surge in EVs. Some states might see an increase in energy use of up to 55%, so only some states are ready for the added demand. So in addition to more charging stations, we're going to need more power. Building these charging stations isn't cheap either. They can cost anywhere from $2,500 to $36,000 each. And that's before installation fees. Automakers and energy companies are footing most of the bill for these stations. But with so many players involved, it could take a while to see widespread coverage. Finally, let's talk about charging prices. Unlike gas stations where you pay by the gallon, EV stations have different pricing structures. Some charge by the session, others by the minute, or by the charging speed. This inconsistency in pricing can be frustrating for drivers, making the whole process feel more like a guessing game than a convenience. The road to EV adoption isn't without its bumps, but things are moving in the right direction. As battery technology improves, prices come down, and charging stations become more accessible, electric cars are looking more and more like the future of transportation. Biden's ambitious EV goals. When President Joe Biden took office, he set a bold goal: installing 500,000 EV chargers across the United States. His aim was clear: to slash the carbon footprint of transportation and revolutionize how America drives. To make this vision a reality, the Biden administration has rolled out a series of incentives and rules to speed up the transition to EVs. The administration is backing its plan with funds from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. These laws are crucial in supporting both the EVs themselves and the charging infrastructure needed to power them. On top of that, new regulations are on the horizon, like the EPA's tailpipe emissions rules for light and heavy-duty vehicles. The only catch? While the rules are still being fine-tuned, the funding is already rolling out. One of the main vehicles for distributing this money is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. The NEVI program is part of the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill signed by Biden on November 2021. With $7.5 billion earmarked for this initiative, the program's goal is clear: to build a nationwide network of fast charging stations. The aim is to ensure that people can charge their EVs quickly and easily, no matter where they are. This funding is split into 2 parts: a formula program for states and a $2.5 billion grant program designed to build charging stations along major alternative fuel corridors. Imagine a road trip where you never have to worry about finding a charger. That's exactly what this program strives to make a reality. During the debate over the EUJA, the National Association of Convenience Stores made sure convenience stores and fuel retailers were represented. Their goal? To ensure the program encouraged private investment and kept the market competitive. The idea was simple: if convenience stores could offer EV charging, it would make the charging process more accessible for everyone. Once the NEVI program launched, states were tasked with submitting plans on how they would use the funding. By 2023, all state plans were approved, but each state had its own approach. Some chose a competitive process to spread funds across multiple recipients, while others focused on just one. States also varied in their focus. Some went for big businesses with large sites, while others took a more balanced approach, involving both large and small operators. It's a bit like piecing together a puzzle, with each state finding its own unique way to make the most of the funds. Beyond just funding, the EUJA also encourages states to rethink electricity rates for EV charging. The goal is to eliminate barriers that could discourage private investment. Some states are working on new electricity rate structures focused on demand charges, which can make charging prohibitively expensive. However, not all states are moving at the same pace. Some have barely taken action. So while some states are charging ahead, others are still figuring it out. Through all of this, NACS has been closely monitoring the program's progress. They've been tracking state plans, attending utility commission meetings, and working with partners like the Charge Ahead Partnership to advocate for convenience stores and fuel retailers. In the end, their mission is simple: ensuring businesses can offer EV charging to customers wherever they are. And that's a story we'll continue to watch unfold in the years to come. So what's your take on this? Are electric vehicles a win for the middle class? And should we be putting so much trust in China for this shift? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching.